I can still feel the cold wind of that evening brushing against my cheeks, sharp and unforgiving, carrying with it the scent of pine and the faint rustle of dying leaves. The mountains of Montana were always beautiful this time of year, golden sunsets melting into the horizon, the valleys below painted with orange and red. But that evening, beauty had turned into horror. My husband, Mark, stood beside me at the cliff's edge, his arm protectively wrapped around my shoulders. Our son, Daniel, stood a few feet away, or rather, our boy who used to laugh, dream, and promise he'd never leave us. But the man in front of us that day wasn't the Daniel we'd raised. There was something different in his eyes, cold, distant, and terrifyingly familiar. "Mom. Dad," he said softly, stepping closer. "You should have stayed out of this." His voice trembled slightly, but there was a firmness in it that chilled me to my bones. "Daniel, please," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Whatever this is, we can fix it. Just talk to us." Mark tried to step forward, but Daniel's hand went into his jacket pocket and my heart dropped. I didn't know what he had in there, but the look in his eyes told me it wasn't good. "Don't move," Daniel warned. "You wouldn't understand. You never did." The wind howled between us, carrying away the echoes of his words. I could barely hear my own heartbeat over it, but I felt it pounding in my chest like a drum of dread. I'd seen Daniel angry before. I'd seen him lost, broken, and confused. But I'd never seen this. His face was pale, his jaw tight, and his eyes, the same blue eyes he inherited from his father, were filled with something between regret and resolve. "What did we do wrong?" I cried. "Daniel, we loved you. We gave you everything." He laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "Everything? You gave me nothing but rules, expectations, and guilt. You ruined my life trying to make me yours." Mark's voice broke through the storm. "Son, listen to yourself. You're not thinking clearly. You're involved with the wrong people, they're using you." Daniel's expression twitched. "No, Dad. You're the one who doesn't get it. You've been in control for too long. It's my turn now." He took another step toward us. The ground beneath our feet was loose, a mix of gravel and dust, dry from weeks without rain. Mark moved slightly to shield me. I felt his body tense, a father's instinct to protect, even from his own child. "Daniel," he said, his voice calm but firm, "put whatever you're hiding away. We can go home. We'll talk. We'll fix this." But Daniel just shook his head slowly. "You can't fix it, Dad. Not anymore." The world froze. The silence that followed was heavier than the mountain air. I could hear the faint sound of birds returning to their nests, the soft crunch of Daniel's boots on the gravel. And then, in one single, horrifying motion, he lunged forward. I didn't even have time to scream before Mark grabbed me, pulling me back, but Daniel's hand slammed into us with a force I didn't know he had. The world turned upside down. I felt weightless for a heartbeat, just one, before the wind screamed in my ears, and the earth disappeared from beneath me. We were falling. The air rushed past us in a blur. I clung to Mark's jacket, my fingers digging into him, tears streaming from my eyes as rocks and branches tore at us. The sound of the wind was deafening, and above it all, I heard Daniel's voice, faint but haunting. "I'm sorry." Then darkness. When I opened my eyes, everything hurt. My body throbbed, my chest ached, and the taste of blood filled my mouth. I tried to move, but every muscle screamed in protest. We were lying on a narrow ledge, halfway down the cliff. Mark was beside me, bleeding from his forehead, his breathing shallow but steady. The drop below us was steep, another 50 feet at least, and the cliff face above stretched high into the fading dusk. I blinked, trying to focus. The sky was turning violet, the last rays of sunlight dying behind the ridge. My ears rang, and my heart felt like it might burst from terror. "Mark," I whispered, shaking his shoulder. "Mark, wake up." He groaned, eyes fluttering open. For a second, confusion clouded his gaze, and then memory hit him like a wave. He pushed us." I nodded, tears spilling over. "Our son. Daniel." Mark grabbed my hand tightly. "Don't move." "What?" "Stay still," he whispered hoarsely. "Let him think we're gone." His voice was barely audible, but I understood instantly. Above us, faint footsteps crunched near the cliff's edge. I froze, breath caught in my throat. My body trembled, not from the cold, but from pure terror. Mark's grip on my hand tightened. I could see shadows shifting above, the outline of a figure pacing back and forth. Daniel. He was still there, checking, waiting, making sure his parents were dead. The betrayal burned deeper than the wounds on my skin. The boy I had carried, fed, comforted through nightmares and heartbreak now stood above us, ensuring his own mother and father were gone from the world. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood, fighting the sob that wanted to escape. Mark slowly turned his head toward me, his eyes glistening in the fading light. "We're going to get out of this," he whispered. "But we can't let him see us alive." For what felt like hours, we stayed still. The air grew colder, night swallowing the last bit of light. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. I could hear Daniel's footsteps fading slowly, methodically, until finally, there was nothing but the whisper of wind through the pines. Only then did I let the tears fall. Mark exhaled shakily. "We have to move before he comes back." My legs trembled as I shifted. The ledge was barely wide enough to sit on, and one wrong move could send us plunging into the darkness below. Every muscle in my body screamed, but I forced myself to stay quiet. Daniel had betrayed us, but why? What could possibly drive our son to something so monstrous? As Mark and I began our slow, painful crawl toward the thicker brush along the cliffside, 1,000 questions screamed in my mind. And one terrifying thought refused to fade. If Daniel thought we were dead, what would he do next? The night swallowed the world whole. The moon was only a thin sliver behind drifting clouds, and the air smelled of dirt, pine, and blood. Every breath burned my throat, every heartbeat reminded me that I was alive, but not safe. Mark's hand never left mine. Even in the pitch-black darkness, I could feel the tremor in his grip, pain, exhaustion, and fear woven together. Above us, the cliff loomed like a jagged shadow. I couldn't see Daniel anymore, but the echo of his footsteps still lingered in my ears. He thought we were gone. That was the only reason we were still breathing. Mark turned his head toward me. His voice was hoarse and low, barely a whisper. "Don't speak loud. Sound carries up the cliff." I nodded, wiping the tears that refused to stop. I wanted to scream. I wanted to climb back up there and demand answers, to shake my son and ask him why. But I knew one wrong move, one careless noise, and Daniel would know we'd survived. "Mark," I whispered, "what if he comes back?" He paused. "Then we stay quiet. Stay hidden. We'll move when the sun rises." I looked down the cliff. The darkness below was endless, a drop into nothingness. The only way out was sideways, through the dense brush and uneven rocks. "How far do you think we fell?" I asked. 20, maybe 30 feet. He winced, clutching his side. I could see the dark stain spreading across his shirt. "You're bleeding, I'll be fine," he said quickly, his tone more steady than his body. "You're the one who needs to stay strong." I swallowed hard. "He pushed us, Mark. Our son." My voice cracked. "Daniel tried to kill us." Mark looked away, jaw clenched. "No," he said after a long silence. "Not tried. He did. We just didn't die." His words hit like a knife. For a while, we didn't speak. The forest hummed quietly, crickets, the rustle of leaves, the occasional distant snap of a branch. Somewhere out there, a coyote howled. I hugged myself, the cold biting through my torn sweater. My mind replayed everything, Daniel's voice, his eyes, the moment he pushed us. I could still feel the betrayal echoing through my bones. How had it come to this? Just a few days earlier, we'd been at home. Mark had been reading the paper, and I was making dinner. Daniel had shown up late, pale, nervous, and distracted. He'd said he was in trouble, but he wouldn't explain. He'd said someone was after him, that he'd made a mistake. Now I understood. "Mark," I whispered suddenly, "do you think he's working with them? Those people he mentioned?" Mark nodded grimly. "Has to be. He's gotten himself tangled in something big, drugs, money, maybe worse. And when we tried to help, he turned on us," I finished, my stomach twisting. The silence that followed was suffocating. Mark shifted slightly, looking up at the cliff. We have to get off this ledge before sunrise. If he comes back to make sure we're gone, he'll kill us, I finished again, barely able to say the words. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. We need a plan. Mark looked at the brush to our left, thick, dark, and maybe just climbable. If we move sideways, we might reach a slope. From there, we can circle around to the trail. I nodded. Let's go. The climb was agonizing. Every move sent pain shooting through my arms. The rocks were cold and jagged, biting into my palms. My vision blurred more than once, but Mark's quiet encouragement kept me moving. Halfway through, I froze. Mark, I hissed. Do you hear that? He stopped. We both listened. A sound drifted down from above, the crunch of gravel. Footsteps. Then a voice. Faint. Low. But unmistakable. Daniel. My heart stopped. He was back. Mark immediately pressed his finger to his lips and pulled me close to the cliff wall. We barely breathed. The footsteps came closer to the edge. Then Daniel's voice again, colder this time. They're gone. Good. Another voice responded, a man's, rough and deep. You sure? Should have checked the bottom. Daniel hesitated. I'm sure. No one could have survived that fall. I felt the blood drain from my face. There was someone with him. The man laughed, a dry, harsh sound. Kid, you did good. Now, let's finish the job and get what's ours. Mark's grip on my hand tightened. He mouthed one word, run. But where? We couldn't move, not yet. The smallest sound would give us away. I could only listen as Daniel and the stranger talked above us. Daniel's voice wavered. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I just needed them out of the way. The man snorted. You want out of a deal, kid, you gotta make sacrifices. You knew that. I thought they'd just. I don't know. Let it go. They were going to the cops, weren't they? A pause. Then Daniel whispered, yes. And in that moment, I finally understood everything. 2 weeks ago, I'd found strange papers in Daniel's backpack, bank slips, names, numbers. Mark had confronted him. He said he was helping a friend with a loan, but the tension in his eyes said otherwise. We thought it was just debt. But this was something darker. The stranger's voice lowered. Don't lose your nerve now. We get the money tonight. Your parents' accounts, the deeds, all of it. Daniel said nothing. Good boy, the man continued. And when we're done, you can disappear. Start over. My heart shattered. Our son had pushed us off that cliff, not just out of fear, but for money. I wanted to scream. I wanted to claw my way up there and make them see what they'd done. But Mark's hand held me still, trembling but firm. When the voices faded and footsteps finally vanished, we stayed frozen in silence for another hour. Neither of us dared move. Finally, when the forest grew quiet again, Mark whispered, now. We started crawling again, slower this time, more cautious. The ledge curved inward, giving us partial cover. My arms ached, and my knees were bleeding, but adrenaline kept me going. After what felt like forever, we reached a small opening, a narrow path leading down through the trees. Mark sighed in relief. We can rest here. I collapsed beside him, breathing hard. My mind was a blur of shock and disbelief. Mark, I whispered, what do we do now? He looked out into the dark. Forest. We survive the night. Then we find help. His eyes hardened. And then, we find out who that man is. We sat in silence for a long time. The forest was alive, owls hooting, leaves whispering, distant howls echoing through the canyons. Every sound made me flinch. But one sound stood out, faint, rhythmic, deliberate. A car engine. It was coming from above, near the cliff. Headlights cut through the trees, sweeping across the ridge. I saw shadows moving, 2 figures loading something into the trunk. Mark narrowed his eyes. They're leaving. I wanted to hope that meant we were safe, but deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Daniel wasn't just lost, he was trapped in something far beyond his control. And if we didn't act fast, the next time we saw him, he wouldn't hesitate. The forest swallowed us whole. Every sound, every whisper of wind, every snapping twig felt like a scream in the silence. The night was endless, cold, and thick with fear. My legs trembled, my arms burned, but Mark kept urging me forward. "Keep moving," he whispered. "We can't stay close to the cliff." The moonlight cut through the trees in thin, ghostly beams, barely enough to see. My vision blurred from exhaustion, but adrenaline pushed me onward. Each breath turned into fog, white against the black air. Somewhere behind us, the forest moved. A twig cracked. I froze. Mark turned instantly, his face pale. "You heard it too?" I nodded slowly. It could have been an animal. A deer. Maybe a raccoon. But deep down, we both knew better. The way the sound stopped as soon as we did, it wasn't random. Someone was there. Mark leaned close, whispering, "Stay low." We crouched, slowly moving through the underbrush. The wet leaves clung to my hands, and every step felt like walking through broken glass. My mind kept spinning images of Daniel, the stranger, the car headlights. The look on my son's face when he pushed us. It replayed like a loop, over and over, until it didn't feel real anymore. Then, in the distance, faint, but unmistakable, I heard voices. Male voices. "You sure they're dead?" one said. A flashlight beam swept across the trees, sharp, white, slicing through the darkness. "They have to be," another voice replied. "But boss wants proof." Said to check the bottom. My blood turned to ice. Mark grabbed my arm and dragged me behind a fallen tree. We ducked low, barely breathing. The flashlight beams grew closer, swinging between trunks and bushes. 2 men. Not Daniel this time, strangers. Both carrying guns. My heart hammered so loud I was sure they could hear it. Mark mouthed silently, "Stay down." I pressed my back against the tree trunk, tears streaming silently down my cheeks. The men's boots crunched closer. "Can't believe the kid had the guts to do it," one said. His tone was amused. "Pushin' his own folks off a cliff, damn." "Yeah," the other replied. "But his soft. You saw his face. Kid's gonna break soon. If they didn't die, he'll be the first to fall apart." They stopped. One of them aimed the flashlight down toward the cliffside. "Nothing down there but rocks." "Then let's go." Boss said to clean up and leave before sunrise. "Yeah, but what about the truck? He still owes us the money." "Doesn't matter. We'll find him later. Kid can't hide forever." Their voices faded as they walked away, the flashlight beams slowly disappearing between the trees. We didn't move for a full 5 minutes after they were gone. Not a sound, not a breath. Finally, Mark exhaled, his voice shaking. "They're working for someone. Whoever that boss is, that's who's behind all of this." I swallowed hard. "And Daniel, he's in too deep." Mark nodded grimly. "We need to get to the highway. If we follow the river, it should lead to the main road." "The river's miles away," he looked at me, steady and determined. "Then we'd better start walking." The forest seemed endless. Hours passed, but the darkness never lifted. We followed the faint sound of running water, moving slowly but constantly. Every muscle screamed for rest, every bruise ached, but fear kept us alive. Sometimes I thought I saw movement behind us, a flicker of light, a shifting shadow, but when I turned, there was nothing. Then, somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. Rain began to fall, slow at first, then harder, until it was pouring. The ground turned slick, mud clinging to our shoes. The cold was unbearable, seeping into my bones. Mark stumbled once, catching himself on a tree. "You okay?" I asked. He gritted his teeth. "Just a little dizzy." But I could see the color draining from his face. The wound on his side was worse than he'd admitted. "We need to stop." "No," he interrupted sharply. "If they're out here, we can't risk it." I helped him walk, his arm draped over my shoulder. The rain masked our footsteps, but it also blurred the path ahead. Finally, we reached the sound of the river, fast, strong, crashing against rocks. Mark sank to his knees, panting. "We'll follow it at sunrise. For now, we rest." We huddled beneath an old pine tree, shivering, drenched and exhausted. The rain dripped rhythmically through the branches above, mingling with the rushing water. For a while, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the storm. Then, softly, Mark whispered, "I keep thinking about him." "Daniel?" He nodded slowly. "I keep asking myself what I missed. How did I not see this coming? The signs, they were all there." His voice cracked, and for the first time that night, I saw tears in his eyes. "He was our boy," Mark whispered. "Our only boy." I didn't know what to say. Because he was right, Daniel wasn't always like this. He was the kind of kid who built forts in the living room, who used to leave little notes saying "love you, Mom" on the fridge. Somewhere between growing up and getting lost, he'd become a stranger. And now, we were running from him. I reached over and held Mark's hand. "We'll get him back," I said softly. "No matter what he's done, he's still our son." Mark looked away, his voice quiet. "If he doesn't kill us first." The rain eased by dawn. The grey light spread slowly through the trees. I could finally see the world again, the twisted branches, the muddy ground, the river carving through the valley like a silver blade. Mark tried to stand, wincing. "Let's move." We started following the river downstream. The terrain was rough, the path uneven, but it was our only hope. After about an hour, we reached a bend, and that's when I saw it. Tire tracks. Fresh. Deep. Someone had been here recently. Mark knelt, examining them. Truck tires. Maybe last night. "Daniel." He looked up, his expression grim. Or the men looking for him. Suddenly, a faint hum broke through the morning air, an engine, coming closer. We dove behind a boulder just as a dark SUV rolled past on the dirt road. 2 men inside. The same ones from the night before. They slowed down, scanning the trees. One leaned out the window, looking straight toward the riverbank. I held my breath so hard my chest hurt. For a second, his flashlight beam swept right over us, then moved on. The SUV drove off, splashing mud, disappearing around the bend. Mark exhaled shakily. "We can't stay here. They're still searching." "But where do we go?" He pointed downriver. "There's a ranger station about 5 miles from here. If we can make it, we'll have a radio and help." 5 miles. Through wet, steep terrain, with men hunting us. But it was hope. And hope was all we had left. As we began our trek along the river, I looked back one last time at the fading tire tracks, the place where the SUV had been. And for a brief moment, I thought I saw him. Daniel. Standing at the edge of the trees, watching. His clothes soaked, his face pale and his eyes hollow. Our eyes met for a heartbeat. Then he turned and vanished into the woods. The sun finally rose, pale and weak through the mist, like it didn't want to shine on what had happened. The forest, drenched from last night's rain, glistened under that fragile light. Every leaf sparkled with dew, every branch hung heavy with water. But to me, it felt like a graveyard. Mark limped beside me, his arm tight around his ribs. Each step looked like pain. I wanted to stop, to rest, but we couldn't. We had to reach the ranger station before the men or Daniel did. "Just keep following the river," Mark said quietly. "We'll see the clearing soon." I nodded, though my legs were numb. My clothes were torn, my shoes caked in mud, and every breath scraped against my lungs. But the thought of Daniel finding us, finishing what he'd started, kept me moving. As we walked, the forest changed. The dense trees thinned out, giving way to patches of open ground. The sound of the river faded behind us, replaced by the eerie silence of the woods waking up. Birds began to sing again, fragile, uncertain melodies that somehow made everything feel even more unreal. I kept glancing behind us. Every time I thought I heard something, a branch breaking, leaves rustling, I froze. But there was nothing. No footsteps. No voices. Just the ghostly quiet. After what felt like hours, we saw it, the top of a wooden roof rising through the trees. The ranger station. It was smaller than I'd imagined, just a single cabin with a rusted antenna and a broken porch light. But to us, it looked like salvation. Mark's shoulders sagged with relief. We made it. We climbed the short hill leading up to it. The ground was soft, still damp from the rain. My heart raced with hope, real hope for the first time since that night. But as soon as we reached the porch, that hope died. The door was open. And inside, something was wrong. Mark held out his arm to stop me. He listened for a moment, then whispered, "Stay behind me." He pushed the door open slowly. It creaked loud enough to make my skin crawl. Inside, the cabin looked like a storm had ripped through it. The table was overturned, papers scattered, a radio smashed on the floor. The smell of smoke lingered in the air, faint but distinct. Someone had burned something recently. "Hello," I called softly. "Is anyone here?" No answer. Mark stepped inside, scanning the room. Whoever was here, they left in a hurry. I picked up a torn piece of paper from the ground. It was part of a map marked with red ink, circling our area of the forest. There were 3 X's drawn along the trail we'd followed. "Mark," I whispered, showing him. They knew where we'd be. Before he could respond, a loud click echoed behind us. We both froze. "Drop it," a voice said. "Now." I turned slowly, and there he was. Daniel. He looked nothing like the boy I remembered. His clothes were filthy, his hair matted, his face pale and hollow. But the worst part was his eyes, red, wild, and full of guilt. He was holding a gun. His hands were shaking, but he kept it aimed at us. "Daniel," I whispered. "Sweetheart, please, don't." His voice cracked. "Don't call me that." Mark raised his hands slowly. "Son, listen to me, shut up." Daniel shouted, his voice echoing through the empty cabin. "You don't get to talk. You ruined everything." My heart broke at the sight of him, terrified, angry, and lost all at once. "Daniel," I said gently, taking a small step forward. "Put the gun down. You don't have to do this." He flinched, eyes darting between us. "You were going to turn me in." "I heard you. You were going to the cops." Mark shook his head. "We were trying to save you. We just wanted to get you out of whatever mess you're in." Daniel's lip trembled. "You think I wanted this? They were going to kill me if I didn't do what they said." "Who?" I asked. He hesitated. "Men. Dangerous men. They loaned me money, Mom. I thought I could pay it back." I thought. He stopped, his voice cracking. "They wanted more. And when they found out I didn't have it, they said I'd better find a way to make it right. They knew about you, about the house, the business, everything. They told me what to do." Tears filled my eyes. "And you listened to them?" "I had no choice," Daniel shouted, slamming the gun against the wall. His voice broke into a sob. "They said they'd kill me. I didn't mean to push you, I swear. I didn't think you'd actually." Mark took a cautious step forward. "Daniel, listen to me. We can fix this. You're not alone anymore. We can go to the police, tell them everything." Daniel looked up, trembling. "You don't get it, Dad. They're already here." Before I could ask what he meant, a noise outside made all 3 of us freeze, the sound of an engine. Daniel's face went white. "They followed me." Mark grabbed my arm. "Get down." The next second, gunfire shattered the windows. Bullets ripped through the cabin walls. Wood splintered, glass exploded. Daniel dove behind the overturned table, pulling us with him. "Mark," I screamed. "I'm fine," he yelled, though his arm was bleeding again. Daniel peeked over the edge, then fired a shot toward the door. "They won't stop until we're all dead." "Who are they?" I cried. He looked at me with haunted eyes. "People I owe everything to, and they're not forgiving people." Another round of shots tore through the walls. We could hear footsteps on the porch, heavy boots, crunching glass. "Mark," I whispered frantically. "We can't stay here." He looked around quickly, spotting a back window half covered by a fallen beam. "That way." Daniel nodded, helping us crawl toward it. The noise outside grew louder, voices shouting, gunfire echoing through the forest. Mark shoved the beam aside, clearing the way. "Go." I climbed through first, scraping my arms on the wood. Daniel came next, then Mark. We ran. The forest blurred around us, trees, mud, branches whipping against my face. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't dare stop. Behind us, The cabin erupted into flames, a ball of orange fire lighting up the grey morning. The explosion threw heat across the trees. I stumbled, nearly falling, but Daniel caught me. "This way," he shouted, leading us down a narrow slope. We kept running until the sound of gunfire faded into the distance. When we finally stopped, gasping for air, we were deep in the forest again, surrounded by thick pines and fog. Mark leaned against a tree, clutching his side. "They're not gonna stop, are they?" Daniel shook his head, breathing hard. "Not until they're sure we're dead." I looked at him, my son, the boy who once built me Mother's Day cards out of construction paper, now covered in dirt, shaking, hunted. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream. But all I felt was heartbreak. "Daniel," I said softly, "we're not going to let them take you. Not again." He looked at me like he didn't believe it. "Mom, you don't understand. They're not just after me now. They'll kill anyone who gets in their way." Mark straightened up, his jaw tight. "Then we'll make sure they never get the chance." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" Mark looked back toward the smoke rising above the trees. "They think we're weak, scared. But I know these mountains better than anyone. If they want to hunt us," he paused, his voice hardening, "then we fight back." We didn't stop moving until the smoke disappeared behind the treetops. The forest swallowed us whole, thick pines, twisting shadows, the ground soft with needles and mud. Every sound felt sharper now. Every rustle in the bushes made my heart jump. Daniel walked ahead, scanning the woods like a soldier. His face was pale, his jaw tight. Mark limped behind him, breathing heavily, one hand pressed against his bleeding arm. I walked last, glancing back every few steps, terrified we'd see them again, the men Daniel had once called friends. We finally stopped in a small clearing beside a narrow stream. The air was cold and damp, and the sound of water running over stones was the only thing breaking the silence. Mark sank down against a tree. "We need to rest," he said, his voice rough. "Just for a few minutes." Daniel looked around nervously. "Resting will get us killed. They'll be tracking us. Dogs, maybe drones." Mark met his eyes. "And running on empty will get us killed faster." I crouched beside him, pulling out what was left of our supplies, a single water bottle and a few crushed protein bars. The ranger station had been our only chance to call for help. Now it was gone, burning in the distance like our last bit of hope. I handed Mark the bottle. "Here." Small sips. He nodded, then passed it to Daniel. My son hesitated before taking it, guilt flickering across his face. "I don't deserve this," he muttered. "Daniel," I said softly, "you're my son. You'll always deserve to live." He looked away. "You wouldn't say that if you knew everything I did." Mark opened his eyes. "Then tell us." Daniel's jaw clenched. He stared at the stream for a long moment before speaking. "They're called the Claymore Group. Not the official one, this is the dirty side. Private contractors, mercenaries. I met one of them a few years ago through a client at the firm. He said they could make money disappear, or appear, depending on what you needed." I felt cold all over. "Daniel, I didn't think it was dangerous," he said quickly. "At first it was just investments, crypto deals, offshore accounts. They promised huge returns. But when the market crashed, they blamed me. Said I'd lost their money." Mark frowned. "How much?" Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. $2 million. The words hit like a gunshot. Mark stared at him in disbelief. $2 million? How? "They said I had 3 months to pay it back," Daniel continued, his voice breaking. "I sold everything. My car, my watch, everything. It wasn't enough. Then they came to the house. They said they'd make it look like an accident, take the insurance, forge the claim, clear the debt. I just had to help them." I shook my head, tears burning in my eyes. "So you were going to let them kill us?" His voice cracked. "I didn't think they'd actually do it. I thought they'd scare you, maybe rough you up. I thought." He stopped when he saw my face. "I'm sorry, Mom. I swear, I didn't know they'd push you off the cliff." The forest fell silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to hit him, to run. But all I did was sit there, staring at the boy who once held my hand crossing the street, who used to fall asleep on my lap. Mark's voice was low, steady. "Then you're going to make this right." Daniel looked up. "How?" Mark pointed toward the west, deeper into the mountains. "There's an old ranger outpost about 5 miles from here. It's off-grid, no power, no signal. I used to take you there when you were a kid, remember?" Daniel frowned, then nodded slowly. "Yeah. The place with the stone chimney. That's the one," Mark said. "We'll get there, regroup, set traps if we have to. If they want to hunt us," he looked Daniel dead in the eye, "we'll give them something to hunt." The next few hours were a blur of movement. We moved carefully, following animal trails, crossing streams to hide our scent. Daniel took the lead, teaching us how to walk without leaving prints, stepping on rocks, spreading our weight, avoiding mud. The air grew colder as the sun began to set. The forest turned gold, then gray. The silence pressed heavier around us. At one point, I heard a distant hum like an engine, faint but steady. Daniel froze. "Drone." We dropped to the ground, crawling under thick brush. A small black drone buzzed overhead, scanning the forest with a blinking red light. My heart thudded so loud I was sure it would hear me. After a minute, it passed. Mark exhaled slowly. "They're getting close. We have to move faster," Daniel whispered. By the time night fell, we reached the outpost, a crumbling stone cabin half hidden in the hillside. It looked abandoned, but solid. The roof sagged in the middle, the chimney cracked, yet it felt like shelter. Inside, it was dark and dusty, filled with old tools and rusted lanterns. Mark found a few blankets and wrapped them around us. Daniel barricaded the door with a wooden beam. For the first time in 2 days, we were safe. Or so I thought. I woke up to the sound of whispering. Daniel and Mark were arguing quietly near the door. Their voices were low, urgent. "You can't go out there," Mark was saying. "I have to," Daniel replied. "If I don't, they'll find us anyway. They'll keep hunting until we're all dead. But if I go to them, tell them you're gone, maybe they'll stop." "That's suicide." Daniel's tone softened. "Dad, I made this mess. I should be the one to clean it up." Mark's voice cracked for the first time. "Son, please. Don't make me lose you too." I sat up. "Daniel, no." He turned to me, tears shining in his eyes. "Mom, I can't keep running. You and Dad, you'll never be safe while I'm alive." I stood and walked to him. "You think dying will fix this? That's not redemption, that's surrender." He looked at me, broken. "Then what do I do?" I took his hand. "You survive. You help us fight back. We go to the police, the FBI, anyone. But we face this together." Mark nodded. "Your mother's right. We're not giving up." Daniel looked between us, and for the first time, I saw the boy he used to be. The one who believed his parents could fix anything. He nodded slowly. "Okay. Together." The next morning, fog rolled in thick and heavy. We could barely see 10 feet ahead. It was eerie, silent, perfect cover. Mark and Daniel set up traps along the path, wires tied to flares, makeshift alarms using cans and stones. I gathered wood, food scraps, anything we could use. We worked in silence, communicating only with gestures. But around noon, we heard it, footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Coming from the east. Mark motioned for us to hide. We crouched behind a fallen tree, holding our breath. A man stepped into view, tall, dressed in black tactical gear, holding a rifle. His face was scarred, his movements calm, deliberate. He scanned the area, then called out, "Daniel, you can't hide forever." My blood ran cold. Daniel whispered, "That's Mason. Their enforcer." Mark's eyes narrowed. "How many?" "3, maybe 4. But he's the worst." Mason's voice echoed through the fog. "You think your parents can protect you? You think they'll forgive you when they find out what you really did?" Daniel's breath hitched. "He's lying." I gripped his hand. "Ignore him." But Mason smiled, as if he could hear us. "Tell them about Ethan, Daniel. Tell them who you really sold out." Daniel froze. Mark looked at him sharply. What is he talking about? Daniel didn't answer. Daniel, I whispered. His eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean for him to die. Before I could ask more, Mason fired a shot, not at us, but into the air. The echo ripped through the valley. Birds scattered. The message was clear. He knew we were there. Mark whispered, "Get ready." Daniel nodded, pulling a flare from his pocket. On my signal. Mason took another step forward, and then all hell broke loose. The first trap went off, a blinding flash of red light and smoke. Mason stumbled, coughing. Daniel lit another flare, throwing it toward him. "Now!" Mark shouted. We ran. Bullets tore through the trees as we zigzagged down the slope. Flares exploded behind us, filling the air with color and chaos. Mason shouted orders, but we didn't look back. We reached the stream again, crossed it, and dove into a ravine. My heart pounded so hard it felt like thunder in my chest. When we finally stopped, Daniel collapsed against the rocks. Mark grabbed his shoulder. "You okay?" Daniel nodded weakly. "They'll regroup soon. We bought maybe an hour." Mark looked at him. "Then we use it." I stared at both of them, father and son, side by side, ready to fight for the family that betrayal had almost destroyed. For the first time, I felt something stronger than fear. Hope. We didn't stop running until the mountains swallowed the last echo of gunfire. The air was cold, wet, and heavy, every breath burning my lungs. I could taste the metallic fear on my tongue. The fog was so thick it felt alive, curling around the trees like ghostly hands. Mark led the way through the narrow ravine, one arm around Daniel's shoulder. My son stumbled often, still weak, still bleeding from a cut on his leg. I wanted to scream at him, shake him, demand the truth about what Mason had said, but I couldn't. Not yet. We needed to survive first. Finally, we found shelter beneath an overhang of rock. Daniel slumped down against the stone, shivering. Mark crouched beside him, checking his pulse, his breathing. "He'll be fine," Mark said quietly, though I could see the worry in his eyes. I sat beside Daniel, brushing damp hair from his forehead. His skin was cold. Too cold. "Daniel," I whispered, "who is Ethan?" His eyes opened slowly. "You heard that?" I nodded. "He said you sold him out." "Who was he?" For a long moment, Daniel didn't answer. He stared into the mist, his face hollow. Then, his voice cracked. "He was my friend. My best friend." He swallowed hard. "We worked together at the firm. When the Claymore group approached me, Ethan was the one who warned me to stay away. He found out what they were really doing, smuggling weapons under the cover of security contracts. He told me we had to report it. But they found out. They told me if I didn't give them his name, they'd come after you and Dad." Mark froze. "So you gave them Ethan?" Daniel nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I thought they'd just fire him, or threaten him. But they killed him. They made it look like an accident. I've lived with that every day since." I felt sick. The fog seemed to close in tighter around us. Mark turned away, his jaw clenched. "You should have told us." Daniel's voice was small, broken. "I couldn't. You'd never forgive me." Mark didn't answer. I reached for Daniel's hand. "You made a terrible mistake. But you're still here. You still have a chance to make it right." He looked up at me, eyes filled with despair. "How, Mom? I can't bring Ethan back. I can't undo what I did." Mark finally turned to him. "You can expose them. Everything, names, accounts, transactions. You said you handled their paperwork, right?" Daniel nodded weakly. "Yeah. It's all on a flash drive. I hid it." "Where?" I asked. Daniel hesitated. "In the cabin. Under the floorboards near the fireplace." My heart sank. "The one that burned?" He nodded again. "But there's a chance it survived. The drive's heat-resistant." Mark stood, determination hardening his voice. "Then we're going back." I grabbed his arm. "Mark, that's suicide. They're still out there. They'll come for us no matter what," he said. "But if we can get that drive, maybe we can end this before it ends us." Daniel shook his head. Dad, you can't. Mason won't stop. He's not just working for them, he enjoys this. Mark's eyes flashed with quiet fury. Then he'll enjoy losing. We waited until nightfall. The fog thickened, the moon hidden behind clouds. The forest was silent except for the distant sound of water dripping from the trees. We moved carefully, Daniel leaning on me for support while Mark led the way back toward the direction of the cabin. Every step was agony, our legs heavy, our hearts pounding. Halfway there, we stopped when Mark raised his hand. Voices. 2 men, faint but clear, somewhere ahead. Check the north side, one said. Mason wants the bodies confirmed by dawn. The other grunted. They can't have gone far. The woman's injured. I froze. Daniel's grip on my arm tightened. Mark motioned for silence. We crouched behind a thick cluster of ferns, holding our breath as 2 flashlights swept across the trees. Their beams sliced through the fog, inches from our faces. My heart thudded so loud I was sure they'd hear it. Then, one of the men stopped. He crouched down, picking something up from the ground. A torn piece of fabric, my scarf. He raised it toward the other man. Got something. Mark's eyes widened. He mouthed, go. But before we could move, a twig snapped beneath Daniel's boot. Both flashlights turned toward us. Over there, gunfire erupted, shattering the night. We ran, branches whipping against our faces, bullets cutting through the trees. Mark grabbed my hand, pulling me through the fog. Daniel stumbled but kept going, the adrenaline pushing him forward. We reached the clearing near the stream again, ducking behind a fallen log. Mark fired a warning shot with the pistol he'd taken from one of Mason's men earlier. The sound echoed like thunder. Then silence. Only the soft hiss of rain beginning to fall. They're regrouping, Daniel panted. We can't stay here. Mark looked at him. We need that drive. Can you find the cabin from here? Daniel nodded, scanning the dark woods. Yeah. This way. The cabin was barely standing when we reached it. The fire had eaten through most of the roof, leaving only blackened beams and smoldering ash. The air smelled of burnt wood and gasoline. Daniel limped toward the fireplace, coughing through the smoke. It's here, somewhere here. He dropped to his knees, pulling at the cracked floorboards. Mark helped him pry them open. I stood guard near the door, holding my breath at every sound outside. Finally, Daniel let out a shaky laugh. Got it. He held up a small, blackened flash drive, its casing scorched but intact. Mark exhaled in relief. Let's go. But before we could move, a voice cut through the darkness. Well done, Daniel. We froze. Mason stepped through the doorway, his rifle raised, his face illuminated by the dying embers. His black gear was streaked with mud and rain, his eyes cold as stone. You really are your father's son, he said with a cruel smile. Stubborn. Predictable. Mark aimed his gun, but Mason didn't flinch. Go ahead. You'll be dead before your finger moves. Daniel stepped forward, holding the flash drive tightly. It's over, Mason. I'm done running. Mason chuckled. Oh, it's far from over. You think that drive means anything? The moment you sent me those files, we backed them up. You were just insurance. Mark frowned. Files? What files? Mason's grin widened. Didn't tell them, did you, Daniel? You didn't just launder money, you helped us erase people. Locations. Names. Ethan was just one of dozens. You were our cleanup boy. Daniel's face went pale. You're lying. Am I? Mason said, stepping closer. Go ahead. Tell your parents how many lives you ruined before you grew a conscience. Mark's gun hand trembled. Daniel. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know. I thought it was just numbers. Accounts. I didn't know they were real people. Mason laughed. And now you think you can fix it all with a single flash drive? That's adorable. I could feel the tension rising like a wave. Mark's finger tightened on the trigger. Mason's smirk didn't fade. Then Daniel did something I didn't expect. He stepped between them. Stop, he said. No more killing. This ends here. Mason tilted his head. Brave words. But you don't get to choose how this ends. And in one motion, he raised his gun. The shot rang out before I could even scream. Mason staggered backward, a dark bloom spreading across his chest. His rifle fell from his hands as he collapsed. Mark stood behind Daniel, his pistol smoking. His face was pale, but his eyes were steady. Daniel turned slowly, staring at his father. You shot him. Mark lowered the gun. He wasn't going to stop. Mason coughed, blood spilling from his lips. You think this changes anything, he rasped. We'll find you, all of you. Then he went still. The forest was silent again. Daniel dropped the flash drive, shaking uncontrollably. What have I done? What have we done? I pulled him close, holding him as tightly as I could. You're alive. That's what matters. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't over. Mason was just one man. The Claymore group was still out there, and they knew our names. Mark picked up the flash drive, wiping the soot from its surface. We're going to the authorities, he said firmly. This ends tonight. Daniel nodded weakly. If we make it that far. I looked out into the fog, the same endless grey that had followed us since the fall. Somewhere in it, I could feel the weight of what we'd survived, and the darkness still waiting. Because surviving was just the beginning. Now, we had to fight back. The night didn't end when Mason died. If anything, that was when it truly began. The storm rolled in fast, thunder echoing through the mountains like the growl of something ancient and angry. Rain poured down in thick, icy sheets, washing over Mason's body, over the ashes of the cabin, over every trace of who we'd been before that night. Mark stood at the doorway, gripping the flash drive like it was the last fragile thread holding our lives together. Daniel knelt beside the fireplace, silent, his face hidden in shadow. I stood between them, a mother, a wife, and a witness to how far love could fall before breaking. Mark, I said softly, we need to move. If Mason was tracking us, others will be too. He nodded, eyes scanning the dark. We head east, down the ridge. There's a ranger post by the old railway. If we can get there, maybe a sound cut him off. Engines. 2, maybe 3, coming up the trail fast. Daniel looked up, terror flashing in his eyes. They're here. Mark grabbed my arm. Run. Now. We darted out the back of the ruined cabin, into the forest once again. The rain soaked through our clothes instantly, turning the earth beneath us into mud. I could hear shouting behind us, men's voices, rough and angry, cutting through the storm. Fan out. Check the ridge. Mark pushed Daniel ahead. Go, go. We slid down the hill, half running, half falling, the flash drive clutched tight in Mark's hand. Thunder cracked above us. Lightning lit up the world for a split second, enough for me to see the silhouettes chasing us. Black figures in the fog. Armed. Relentless. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't stop. Not again. Not now. We reached the stream at the base of the ridge. The water was high from the rain, rushing fast and furious. Daniel looked at it, then at us. We can't cross. It's too deep. Mark glanced back, flashlights flickered through the trees, getting closer. Then we go through, he said. They won't expect it. Before I could argue, he plunged into the icy current, pulling me after him. The shock of the water stole my breath. It was freezing, biting into my skin like knives. Daniel followed, struggling to keep his balance as the current dragged at his legs. Halfway across, a bullet whizzed past, splashing into the water beside us. Keep moving, Mark shouted. We stumbled out on the other side, gasping, shivering, soaked to the bone. Up there. Daniel pointed to a rocky slope ahead. That leads to the railway. We climbed, clawing at roots and stones. Behind us, voices grew louder. They were closing in. When we finally reached the top, I saw it, the old railway line, rusted and broken, cutting through the forest like a scar. And ahead of it, through the mist, a faint orange glow. Mark squinted. Campfire. Daniel nodded. Could be rangers. Or them, I finished. We had no choice. As we approached, the glow became clearer, a small camp beneath the railway bridge. and sitting beside the fire were two figures. One was dressed in ranger uniform. The other in a dark trench coat, his face hidden under a hood. Mark raised his gun cautiously. "Stay behind me." The ranger turned, startled. "Whoa, easy. Who are you people?" Mark stepped forward. "We need help. We've been attacked," but before he could finish, the hooded man stood. Slowly. Calmly. And when he lifted his head, my blood turned to ice. It wasn't one of Mason's men. It was Ethan. Or rather, the man Daniel had called Ethan. Except, he wasn't dead. Daniel froze, his voice trembling. "No, that's impossible." Ethan smiled faintly. "Surprised to see me, old friend?" Mark lowered the gun, confused. You were supposed to be dead." Ethan shrugged. "That's what Claymore wanted everyone to think. They failed. I went dark, changed my name, burned every record." Daniel stepped closer, shaking. "You let me think you were dead." "I had to," Ethan said quietly. "You were compromised. I couldn't risk them using you to find me." Daniel's fists clenched. "They killed people, Ethan. Because of me." Ethan's expression hardened. "Because you helped them." The words cut like a blade. Daniel looked away, guilt heavy in every breath. Mark spoke. "If you're alive, you can help us. We have evidence, names, accounts." Ethan raised a hand. "I know. I've been building my case for months. I needed that flash drive." Mark hesitated. "You knew about it?" Ethan nodded. "I planted the encryption myself. When Daniel turned, I left a backdoor in his system. I knew eventually he'd realize what he'd done, and come looking for redemption." He looked straight at Daniel. "And here you are." Daniel's voice cracked. "You think I deserve redemption?" Ethan stared at him for a long moment. "That's not for me to decide." Then, from the shadows, a gun clicked. The ranger, the one we thought was safe, now held his rifle leveled at Ethan's head. "I think it's time you handed that drive over," the man said coldly. "You're all coming with me." Ethan sighed. "Of course. There's always one more." Before the ranger could react, Ethan moved fast. He knocked the rifle aside, tackling the man to the ground. The gun went off, echoing through the forest. Mark jumped in, kicking the weapon away. But then, more voices. From the trees. "They'd found us." "Down!" Mark shouted. Bullets tore through the night. Ethan dragged the ranger's body in front of him as cover, firing back with precision. Daniel pulled me behind a fallen beam. Sparks flew as bullets hit metal. Ethan shouted, "There's too many. Run." Mark hesitated. "We can't leave you. Go." Ethan barked. "I'll hold them off. Get that drive to someone who can expose them." Daniel grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the railway bridge. Rain poured harder now, thunder shaking the ground. Mark followed, firing a few covering shots. We climbed up the rusted metal structure, hearts pounding, hands slipping on wet rails. Below us, flashes of light and gunfire flickered in the fog. Ethan's silhouette fought like a shadow come to life until one last explosion of sparks sent everything silent. "Ethan!" Daniel screamed. But there was no answer. We ran. For hours, it felt like. Through mud and darkness and rain, until the forest finally broke into open ground. In the distance, lights. Civilization. Mark collapsed to his knees, gasping. "We made it." Daniel fell beside him, clutching the flash drive to his chest. He saved us." I knelt between them, my heart breaking and healing all at once. We'd lost everything, our home, our safety, even the belief that family could never turn on family. But somehow, through betrayal and blood, we had survived. And maybe that was enough. 3 months later. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. The defendants from the Claymore Group are hereby found guilty of conspiracy, fraud, and multiple counts of murder. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Justice, long, painful, but real, had finally arrived. Daniel sat beside me, wearing a plain suit, his hands trembling. He wasn't free, not yet. He'd agreed to testify, to confess everything he'd done. He'd be serving time. But this time, he wasn't running. He turned to me, whispering, "Do you think Ethan made it?" I smiled softly, though tears filled my eyes. "I think he's watching. Somewhere." Mark put an arm around us both. He gave us a second chance. "Don't waste it." Daniel nodded, looking down at his cuffed hands, then at the flash drive on the table, now evidence sealed in plastic. "That little piece of metal," he said quietly, "destroyed so many lives. But maybe now it can save some." I squeezed his hand. Maybe that's redemption. Outside the courthouse, rain began to fall again, gentle this time, like the world itself was washing away what came before. And as we stepped out into that grey morning, I realized something. We didn't fall off that cliff because we were weak. We fell because life wanted to see if love could survive the fall. And somehow, it did.